Check, check. All right. Hey, thank you guys for waiting. Two viewers. I don't know what is going on each week. It's supposed to leave the settings the same and then it changes them. So I was giving it a few minutes anyway so I could share the link out and let people get over here in the middle of a work day here, Wednesday, 12:45. Um, I hope that you're doing well. Looking forward to going into Revelation 13 with you. Hope you're having a good week. Looking forward to fasting. Tomorrow is our fasting day. We're praying for unity amid diversity, meaning that we would love and pray for one another even when Jesus is the only thing we have in common. And that's usually the case. We want to be the church and pray for one another in that way. Let me make sure my slides are going to work here. And I think that they are. Thank you guys also for coming out to the s'mores event last Sunday evening. That was fun. I think we had about maybe 15 to 20 of y'all, and just kind of hung out, and it was good. Roasted marshmallows. Had several folks brought lawn chairs and brought their dogs, and it was good just to hang out with y'all. Very, very glad that you came. So I'm going to move this up here. I don't know what's going on. Let's try this again. Here we go. Hey Diane, does this look good? Can you see good? I hope that you can. We're going to go ahead and jump into Revelation 13. I love being your pastor. I love Main Street Baptist Church. I love how we are fasting and praying together and what the Lord is doing during this time. And I love how it's changing you. It seems like the past several weeks, um, people have been praying more, I think. And I think as a result of people praying more, it seems like the church is just happier. I don't know if it's just me, but it just seemed like Sunday and different people I've talked to in meetings with, people are just kind of happier. And I think it's because you've been spending more time with Jesus. I really do. So I'm just thankful for what's going on in the life of our church right now during this time of replanting. But let's go ahead and study the Word together. I've titled this The Worship of the Beast because you've probably heard it titled The Mark of the Beast, right? Well, we're going to look and consider the worship of the beast, which I think is what we need to be more worried about than the mark of the beast. So let's read this text. I'll pick out a pen. Let's make it yellow. Haven't done yellow in a while. All right, midweek pandemonium. Here we go. And I saw a beast rising out of the sea, with 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 diadems on its horns and blasphemous names on its heads. And the beast that I saw was like a leopard, its feet were like a bear's, and its mouth was like a lion's mouth. And to it the dragon gave his power and his throne and great authority. So we'll stop there. If you remember last time, we kind of had this apocalyptic Christmas story where the dragon had a war, a holy war in heaven, and came down to earth, and it is Satan himself, and was now, allowed to go and run amok over the earth, and he wanted to devour the woman's baby, who we decided was Israel, and the baby was the offspring, Jesus, who would rule with an iron rod. Jesus was taken up into heaven. He ascended into heaven. He didn't die like Satan had thought he would. And so there he was. He decided to go back and torment his mother, and then was just sort of left sitting on the sands of the beaches looking out into the water. And so now moving into chapter 13, we have Satan looking out into the water, and this is what's happening. There's a beast rising out of the sea. This is the first of two beasts that we'll look at in Revelation 13. This one has 10 horns, 7 heads, 10 diadems on its horns, and blasphemous names on its heads. I think this is to show its power and its might, its strength, and the diadems showing, I think, a little bit of its royalty. This beast is going to come and deceive people and look like something worth worshiping. But it does have blasphemous names on its heads. Satan, we saw, was a deceiver. He sought to deceive the woman of the offspring, Jesus, the last chapter, and so now he's still doing his deceptive work, blasphemous names on its heads. And there could be other things to say about historical context there. But we see what the beast looks like: a leopard, feet of a bear, mouth of a lion's mouth. And these point us back to the book of Daniel, who he has an apocalyptic vision, and he has all these same animals, but they're 4 separate beasts. And this is kind of one beast with all of these likenesses, and it's listed in opposite, in reverse of Daniel, almost like John is looking back into time and seeing it in reverse somehow. So I do think this is directly recalling Daniel's vision. But here's what's most important here. To this beast, the dragon gives his power, his throne, and great authority. So when this beast begins to take action and start doing things, we need to see it as the very work of Satan. This is Satan at large with the power of this beast. Keep reading verse 3. One of its heads, out of its 7, right, seemed to have a mortal wound, but its mortal wound was healed, and the whole earth marveled as they followed the beast. And they worshipped the dragon, for he had given his authority to the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast, and who can fight against it?" Here we have, I think, a connection to Genesis, the great promise that Jesus's, or the offspring of Israel, his heel would be bruised, and the head of the serpent would be crushed. So here on one of the heads, there appears to be this mortal wound, and mortal showing its physicality, right? Even though this is some kind of demonic force, it has a physical presence. But the wound was healed. It has a scar on its head from the cross, most likely, when the war took place. And the whole earth marveled as they followed the beast. And so here I do think the beast is Satan, who was crushed under the heel of Jesus on the cross. Also, though, using that as an opportunity to sort of show himself to be the true Messiah. He's trying to take Jesus' worship by, saying, "I am this one who was crushed and is now alive." They worshipped the Lamb who was dead and is now alive, who stands as though he had been slain. We read that in other passages in Revelation. So we now have this beast who's saying, "Look at me, I died too, and I came back to life." Right? So he's sort of posing as this great Savior. So they begin to worship the dragon, for he'd given authority over the beast, and they worship the beast, and they're thinking that nobody is greater than this awesome, powerful, incredible beast that has risen up out of the ocean like Godzilla, right? You'd think they would be terrified, but instead they turn to worship. A couple points. First of all, Satan will deploy antichrists to expand his kingdom. Satan will deploy antichrists to expand his kingdom. Many have interpreted this passage to be the first beast as the Antichrist. Many have interpreted this passage to say that the second beast in a moment is the Antichrist. Antichrist is actually not in the book of Revelation at all. The word is never used one time. But we do have different sort of clues that point us to this man of lawlessness. I do believe that it's more likely the second. But either way, others have interpreted that this beast is not a physical being at all, but rather governmental powers coming together and working at play at some point, creating some sort of one world order. There have been many different interpretations, and these are all futurist views. Others have interpreted this beast to be someone like Nero, who's already fallen, back in history past. So, either way, we know how Satan works. He is not alone. he will deploy Antichrist to expand his kingdom, and he's using his demons even today to deceive men and women all over the earth. Satan is not alone. He has many fallen angels who he took out of heaven with his tail, as we saw in Revelation chapter 12. Second point, Satan desires to be worshipped like Jesus. See, Satan's final goal isn't just the downfall of the church. His final goal is to actually take the throne of God. When he rebelled in heaven, it wasn't just to start a big holy war, but it was to be God. It was to deceive the world into thinking that he was God, which is why he now wears his scar proudly from the cross, saying that I've fallen and I've risen just like this Jesus whom you love. You should love me. Look at my giant monster who's come out of the sea. I'm greater. I'm stronger. Satan desires to be worshipped like Jesus. Let's keep reading. There'll be more application. Verse 5, and the beast was given a mouth, uttering haughty and blasphemous words, and it was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. It opened its mouth to utter blasphemies against God, blaspheming his name and his dwelling, that is, those who dwell in heaven. Also it was allowed to make war on the saints and to conquer them. And authority was given it over every tribe and people and language and nation, and all who dwell on earth will worship it. Everyone whose name has not been written before the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who was slain. Let's stop there because that's a lot. So he was given a mouth uttering haughty and blasphemous words, just like the blasphemous names that are on its head. And it was allowed, we've already seen that a lot in Revelation, right? Satan does nothing without the Lord allowing it. And so even now, whatever the Lord has allowed Satan to do, Satan is sharing that authority with this beast, and it's exercising authority for 42 months, 3.5 years, half of a 7-year period, which we've seen repeated. And it opened its mouth to utter blasphemies against God, against his name, his dwelling. It hates the Lord. He is seeking to make himself God and all those who dwell in heaven. It's making war on the saints. So here, there are clearly saints still on the earth. And it seeks to conquer them. Authority was given it over every tribe, people, and language and nation, which is something that Jesus alone is supposed to do, right? But he's trying to have authority over tribe, people, tongue, and nation. And all who dwell on the earth will worship it. That's the most telling right there. Can you imagine a world where everybody on the earth is worshiping this one awful beast, and those who refuse to worship it are those whose names have not, or I'm sorry, everyone whose name has not been written down in the book of life are the ones who are worshiping it. Those whose names are written down are being persecuted, making war against. Many of them are dying at the hands of this beast. And here's a little interesting, thing you can't ignore in the Bible either, right? Before the foundation of the world, those names were not written down in the Lamb's book of life. Well, there's a can of worms that we could get into. Satan knows whose names are and are not written down in the Lamb's book of life. They have been written there since before the foundation of the world, since before you were born, and only those whose names are written will not fall to worship this mighty beast, this dragon. But everyone whose names are not written will worship this beast. I'd be happy to talk about that more when I have more time. But this is a reference to election, which is something the Bible teaches very clearly, and we need not be afraid of it. Verse 9, if anyone has an ear, let him hear. If anyone is to be taken captive, to captivity he goes. If anyone is to be slain with the sword he must be slain. Here is a call for the endurance and faith of the saints. So a lot of times when we interpret the book of Revelation, we're wanting to just wipe ourselves out of this story, right? We think all this stuff up here, yeah, we're good, we're not going to be there, blah, 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 rapture, rapture, rapture. But we're there, right? And here is a call for anyone with ears, listen up. If we're still around in this futurist period, we may be taken captive, and that is the Lord's will. To captivity he goes. If anyone is to be slain with the sword, that is the Lord's will. To be slain, he must. We must, more than anything, endure and have faith. for Christ is with us. We must not worship this beast. Let's continue. The whole earth will worship Satan. He already has authority in some degree over this whole earth. He's seeking whom he may devour, but really only in part. Soon, when the Lord begins his destruction of the earth and judgment, the whole earth will indeed worship Satan. If you think this world is fallen now, oh my goodness, I pray that you and I don't have to see that day. How terrible of a day it will be when all are deceived and all are worshiping Satan. Atheism is not our great fear. Agnosticism is not our great fear. Buddhism, Islamic beliefs, and all these other things, these other religions, are not our great fears. What is coming and is going to be a clear sign of the end is when the whole earth, the whole world, is worshiping Satan, brought about what was already in them from their true Father. Secondly, followers of Christ, though, will not be deceived. We often fear, and this is something I want to talk about more in the next couple verses. We're worried that we're going to be deceived, even though we're Christians in those end days. But we already saw that our names are written down before the foundations of the world, and Jesus' pencil does not have an eraser on it, right? We don't need to fear. It may be scary to be slain to death by a sword. It may be scary to be taken captive for our faith. Oh, but we will not lose our salvation. We have our blessed inheritance freely given to us. We need not be afraid of these end days, whether we experience them ourselves or not. For the followers of Christ will not be deceived. We must endure, keep the faith. Let's keep reading. Then I saw another beast. Here's the second beast rising out of the earth. The first beast rose out of the sea. The second beast rises out of the earth. 2 horns like a lamb, and it spoke like a dragon. It exercises all the authority of the first beast in its presence, and makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose mortal wound was healed. It performs great signs, even making fire come down from heaven to earth in front of people, and by the signs that it is allowed to work in the presence of the beast, it deceives those who dwell on earth, telling them to make an image for the beast that was wounded by the sword and yet lived. So this beast who rises out of the earth is more likely the Antichrist, because we have it with these 2 horns like a lamb. Who's like a lamb, right? This is a reference to Jesus, and yet it spoke like a dragon. Who's the dragon, right? Satan. So even though it looks like the lamb, it's trying to deceive others, it's speaking like the dragon. And it has all the authority of the beast. It's making and bringing all these people to worship him, saying, look at me, I was fallen by the sword, and now I'm healed. I'm doing great signs. And look at this, he's even making fire come down. That is a classic Yahweh move, right? Think of the book of Exodus. He's showing the world all these signs and wonders to make them believe that this is the true God. This is the being that we ought to worship. This is the true deity, right, of all the universe. And by all these signs, it is deceiving those who dwell on the earth, and then finally telling them to make an image for the beast. And that should be your biggest clue, right? God would never tell us to make an image. He talked a lot about that, right? You ever read Isaiah? Have you ever read any of the major prophets and some of the minor prophets? The golden calf of Exodus, right? We're not to be making images. But yet, this Antichrist person who comes up out of the earth rather than out of the sea, which seems like he's a embodied person of some kind, is deceiving everybody and tells them to make an image of that big beast that came up out of the sea. I'll give you a few points here. You might remember 2 Thessalonians 2, 9 through 12. Tell me if this doesn't describe what we just read. The coming of the lawless one is by the activity of Satan, with all power and false signs and wonders, and with all wicked deception for those who are perishing, because they refused to love the truth and so be saved. Therefore God sends them a strong delusion, so that they may believe what is false, in order that all may be condemned who did not believe the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. So we see here that this delusion is not only from Satan, but from the Lord himself, who is allowing all these things to take place. Because these people who are being deceived, who are worshiping Satan, were already sons of Satan. They already were condemned. They already did not believe the truth. They had pleasure in unrighteousness. And so God is using the idolatry of Satan to bring about their true selves. There will be no nominal Christians in those days. The fruit of their works will be evident that they never believed in the first place, because now they are worshiping Satan himself through this great Antichrist. Don't be deceived by signs and wonders. Don't be deceived by signs and wonders. There are churches today, dear family, that are obsessed with signs and wonders. The church of Jesus' day was obsessed with signs and wonders. Are you the Messiah, they would say? Show us a sign. Give us a miracle. You miracle worker, do something. Show us. And so we have this obsession with the miraculous supernatural nature of things, and we won't believe something unless that's the case. First of all, Jesus has shown all the supernatural works that we need to believe in him, but we don't need them because we have his holy word. He came, he lived among us, he died, he rose from the dead. We have the very certain words of truth, the gospel, that is all we need to hear and be saved. And the faith that the Lord works in our lives to make us alive together with Christ. And still, though, today, I mean, there are many churches, and I'm not going to name names or talk about, or diss any churches, but there are churches who are just longing to be faith healers and see people come out of their sickness and disease and these signs and wonders. Satan will work signs and wonders that look miraculous and look like a work of Christ, but are truly a work of demonology. And so we need to be careful about these things. Don't be deceived by signs and wonders now or in the age to come. Secondly, many will come in his name, but will not be his disciples. Many in those days will probably have been, affiliated with Christ in some degree, but they did turn to worship this king, showing that they were never truly of Christ to begin with. They left him so quickly. They never had the sealing of Christ on their foreheads, and so they fell prey to the worship. And so today, what this is calling us to be warned about is false teachers. There are false teachers coming in his name today. Many of them are on TV. Many of them are writing blogs and articles. Many of them are pastors and writing books and doing all sorts of things to deceive people. They will come in his name, but they will not be his disciples. They will know his truth, but will twist it, slander it, blaspheme him to get a following for themselves. This is the work of Satan, and we should be aware that it's going on not only in the future, it is going on this very moment. Do not believe these false teachers. Know the Bible for yourself. Study. Know what it says. Let's read these final verses, and we'll be done. You finish up here. Verse 15. And it was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast might even speak, and might cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be slain. Also it causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark. That is, the name of the beast or the number of its name. We'll stop there for a moment. I know y'all want to talk about verse 18. But first of all, it was allowed to give breath. So again, Satan allowing this, who's only allowing this because God is allowing this, to give breath to this image. So evidently, mankind made this image of the beast, and then Satan somehow breathed life into it, and the beast was able to even speak. Maybe this was some sign or wonder, right? Like the magicians of Pharaoh were able to do. Or maybe it was just some sort of demonology taking place in the image that they had made. It might cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be slain. So now the image that they made, the idol they made, is talking, and if anybody doesn't bow down to it, whether they're a believer or not, they are going to be killed. They're going to be slain. Excuse me. And it causes all to be marked on either their right hand or their forehead, so that they can't buy or sell unless they have bowed down and worshiped this speaking image who looks like the big beast that came up out of the sea, out of the ocean. Makes a lot of sense, right? And so people have been so concerned about this from the beginning of time. Oh, how many people have worried and been so fearful and have tried to figure out what the mark of the beast is. Is it, social security cards that have come out, Visa cards and IDs? Has it been the development of technology and our addresses and where we live? So many different things. Microchips. People are terrified of microchips and all of this. People thought every president that has ever lived was probably the Antichrist. How many people are claiming Trump is the Antichrist? But before it was Obama, and before that it was Bush, and before that it was all the other people, right? So, y'all, we need to quit with the superstition and just read the word for what it says. This calls for wisdom. This does not call for prophecy books. This calls for wisdom. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Again, I think historicists might view this as a literal man. Nero or someone else of their day, or someone of Rome, that had an affiliated number 666. Many have tried to literally take this to calculate it and to figure out the lettering system with the numbering system that might equal 666, that would come out to be a word or like someone's name. There are different ways that people have gone about trying to interpret this, and they're not all bad. But I think the most just clear, knowing what the Bible says and thinking about God's Word from the very beginning, we understand that the number of man is 6. Man was given life on the 6th day. And so the number of God is the number of 7, perfect, and the number of man is the number 6. And so he's saying this is the number of a man. His number is 666. Even though it appears to be this big scary beast, he is actually a mere man. We need not fear him. Even his great power given by Satan, allowed by God, is still just a man. And so we need not be afraid of it. So the number of man is 6, and so we have this number 666 that would be marked on foreheads or hands, and they would not be able to buy or sell. Let me just give you a couple points here. Refusing the worship of the world in any age will have consequences. Right? I mean, has that ever not been true? Christians have been being killed for their faith since people became Christians, since Jesus died for us. From the very beginning, when we have refused to worship different ways, Daniel was thrown into a fiery, or the 3 buddies were thrown into a fiery furnace, right? And so from the very beginning, we have always had consequences for not worshiping the way the world tells us to worship. So whether it's today or in the age to come, there are always consequences. We don't need to be surprised by the fiery trials of consequence that come upon us when we don't worship the way the world wants us to. Everybody worships something. The question is, are we going to worship the idols of the world, or are we going to worship Christ? The consequences will get more severe in the day of tribulation. But here's some good news, I hope. We bear the mark of Christ and have no fear of the 666. What can mere man do to me? Man may kill the body, but God kills the soul. I don't know why people don't bring this up more, right? Revelation 7 says we have the mark of Christ. Revelation 14 says we have the mark of Christ. Revelation 22 says we have the mark of Christ, right? So Satan putting out his own mark is just trying to copy Jesus, just like saying he rose from the dead, right? He's just trying to be God, trying to claim that he has something. We have the mark of Christ sealed on our foreheads. We already have the Holy Spirit within us. We don't need to be afraid of whatever this, numbering system is, regardless of how you interpret it. Don't fear. Don't be afraid of it in those end days, whether we are experiencing them or not, or will be there in those days or not. Have no fear. Um, we have the Holy Spirit. There is no room for a demonic force within us. We simply will not fall prey to worshiping Satan because our names are written down in the Lamb's Book of Life, and they have been since the foundation of the world, since before the foundation of the world. So do not fear the mark of the beast, and don't fear the worship of the beast. Dear Christians, have endurance, have faith, watch out for false teachers, watch out for the schemes of the devil, pursue Christ with all you have, and know that he who is in the world has been conquered by he who is greater than the world. And he who is greater than the world is in you and I. We have the immeasurably great power of God given for us on our behalf to overcome temptation. So this video has been far too long. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. I love y'all. Let me know if you have any questions about Revelation 13. Looking forward to this Sunday. Going to be an epic week. We're going to have a baptism and a lot of special things planned. So y'all come out. 10 a.m. Love you dearly. Talk to you later.